Laudetur Jesus Christus. Vatican and World News.
In the headlines this Tuesday, January the 19th, Filipino bishops call for an independent investigation into the killing of 9 indigenous leaders on the island of Panay. 1 migrant dies and 24 are rescued in the Mediterranean Sea off the Greek island of Lesbos. And Pope Francis sends a video message to bishops and priests in Venezuela, encouraging them in their pastoral ministry amid the pandemic and other difficulties. In the Vatican, I'm Linda Bordoni. The bishops of the Philippines are calling for an independent investigation into the recent killing of 9 indigenous leaders. As Devin Watkins reports, church leaders have expressed doubt that those killed had resisted arrest before being gunned down.
Authorities in the Philippines carried out a joint military and police operation on December 30th in the city of Tapaz, which lies on the island of Panay in Capiz province. Authorities were seeking the arrest of what they deemed high-value personalities of the Communist Party of the Philippines, or New People's Army, over alleged possession of explosives and firearms. They claimed 9 of the group resisted arrest and opened fire on law enforcement officers before police shot and killed them. Another 18 people were taken into custody in the operation. Those killed were leaders of the Tumandok indigenous communities. Eyewitnesses, however, dispute the official version of the events and say the men were unarmed and offered no resistance. In response, Cardinal Jose Advincula of Capiz, along with 7 other Catholic bishops from nearby dioceses, issued a pastoral letter calling for an independent investigation. In the letter dated January 15th, the bishops supported claims that the victims were unjustly killed. The families counterclaimed that the victims did not resist arrest, they wrote. The firearms and explosives were planted. The victims were murdered. Rights groups in the Philippines say the government often alleges that indigenous leaders fighting for the rights of tribal people are members of the Communist Party. The indigenous leaders had recently voiced opposition to the construction of a large dam which would impact the community's ancestral lands. Cardinal Advincula and the other bishops said the killings were meant to whip up fear among indigenous communities. At least 500 people fled their homes in the wake of the violence. This atrocity has created a climate of fear and uncertainty among residents in Tumandok communities, the bishop said. Fear has forced many to seek safety elsewhere. The recent violence is part of a long-running trend of extrajudicial killings which has seen many social leaders murdered by police. In this vein, the bishops of the Western Visayas urge security forces to strictly observe ethical standards and rules of engagement when they serve warrants. They also suggest police wear body cameras to protect civilians from any type of abuse. I'm Devin Watkins.
The Greek Coast Guard on Tuesday rescued 24 people and recovered the body of 1 man from the southern part of the Greek island of Lesbos. Lydia O'Kane has more.
The desperate attempt to flee conflict and poverty in search of a better life ended in tragedy on Tuesday off the Greek island of Lesbos. Around 25 migrants who had arrived by boat from nearby Turkey were located by a Greek Coast Guard vessel on an inaccessible part of the island's coast. At least 1 man died, and a helicopter and several Coast Guard vessels were searching the area following reports from the migrants that there could be a further 3 people missing. It was not immediately clear how the group arrived or what had happened to their boat. As many people attempt to flee wars and poverty in the Middle East, Africa and Asia, the dangerous journey from the Turkish coast to the Greek islands has been regarded as one of the most popular entry points into the European Union. Many migrants make the perilous voyage in unseaworthy boats or dinghies, oftentimes overcrowded. A deal brokered between the EU and Turkey in 2016 requires that new arrivals be held on the islands pending deportation back to Turkey unless they successfully apply for asylum in Greece. The agreement has led to greatly overcrowded camps on the Greek islands. After visiting a camp on the Greek island of Lesbos in 2016, Pope Francis brought back to Rome with him 12 Syrian migrants. Following the recitation of the Angelus on September the 13th last, the Pope also expressed his solidarity and closeness to the victims of a massive fire that devastated the Moria refugee camp on Lesbos. I'm Lydia O'Kane.
The latest caravan of migrants originating in Honduras is facing a markedly different response from the authorities of neighbouring Guatemala and Mexico. James Blears reports hearts are hardening and times are changing.
A confrontation on a road near the traversed border from Honduras across to Guatemala, in which hundreds of migrants were held back by anti-riot personnel clad in olive green uniforms, wielding batons and then firing tear gas. It was a portrait etched in sheer desperation. The police ranks, which were 6 deep, held off the attempted breakthrough as the more desperate elements surged forward, but the majority backed off. Starting off from San Pedro Sula, Honduras, numbering 3,000, the caravan's now increased to more than 10,000 people. Its members are encouraged by Joe Biden, who'll be elected US President tomorrow, promising a path to citizenship for more than 11 million undocumented people already in the United States, but they're ignoring advice that an exodus from their countries to the US border isn't a fast-track solution. The Guatemalan government's urging its counterparts in Honduras to stop mass exits, and the Mexican Foreign Ministry is supporting this stance. However, that doesn't take into account the situation in Honduras, which has worsened from desperate to critical. People who have fled their homes have done so because of acute poverty, no job prospects, the constant menace of organised crime, and 2 hurricanes which have hit the country in November, plus the ravages of the pandemic. Their plight has caused their flight. This isn't a problem which is going to go away overnight, especially as projections for economic recovery are likely to extend to years. The incoming administration in Washington has to realise that they'll have to deal with a major crisis in Central America. A viable solution to stem this exit strategy is urgently needed. For Vatican News, James Blair's reporting.
In China, 12 miners remain trapped underground after an explosion at Hushan mine in eastern Shandong province. Rescuers have managed to send them nutritional liquids and medicine via a long, thin communication tunnel. The miners have been able to communicate thanks to a new telephone line. 10 other miners remain missing in the gold mine. Their fate is unclear. The 22 men were trapped on the 10th of January when an explosion damaged the exit and the communication system of the mine, which was still under construction. The cause of the explosion is not known. The world is on the brink of a catastrophic moral failure in sharing the COVID-19 vaccines. That's the opinion of the head of the World Health Organization, who urged countries and manufacturers to spread doses more fairly around the world. Christopher Wells has the story.
WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said the prospects for equitable distribution were at serious risk, just as its COVAX vaccine sharing scheme aimed to begin distributing inoculations next month. He noted 44 bilateral deals were signed last year, and at least 12 have already been signed this year. This could delay COVAX deliveries and create exactly the scenario COVAX was designed to avoid, with hoarding, a chaotic market, an uncoordinated response, and continued social and economic disruption, he said. Such a me-first approach left the world's poorest and most vulnerable at risk, he said, at the opening of the body's annual executive board meeting, which took place in virtual format. Ultimately, these actions will only prolong the pandemic, he added, urging countries to avoid making the same mistakes made during the H1N1 and HIV pandemics. Meanwhile, an independent panel said on Monday that Chinese officials could have applied public health measures more forcefully in January of last year to curb the initial COVID-19 outbreak, and criticized the WHO for not declaring an international emergency until January 30th. The experts reviewing the global handling of the pandemic, led by former New Zealand Prime Minister Helen Clark and former Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, called for reforms to the Geneva-based United Nations agency. I'm Christopher Wells.
Italy's Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte is urging senators to back his government as it battles with the pandemic and faces a confidence vote which could prompt his resignation. The upcoming Senate vote follows a vote in the Chamber of Deputies which he won, securing an absolute majority. The crisis was triggered last week when former PM Matteo Renzi pulled his party out of the ruling coalition over its handling of the pandemic. The Senate vote results expected on Tuesday evening could leave Conte short of a majority there. But if he wins the vote, even with no absolute majority, he can stay in office. Losing would force him to resign, but even then Italy could avoid a snap election, as President Sergio Mattarella could invite him to form a new coalition government. And finally, in a video message, Pope Francis encourages the bishops and priests of Venezuela in their pastoral ministry of service to God's people amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Father Benedict Mayaki reports.
Pope Francis sent a message on Tuesday to the bishops, diocesan priests and religious of Venezuela during a virtual meeting organized as a space to share their experiences during this time of health emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic.
En Venezuela y en el mundo entero.
Pope Francis said that he thanked the Lord for the opportunity to be able to address them during the meeting and noted that it was an opportunity to share, in a spirit of ministerial fraternity, their priestly experiences, labors, uncertainties, as well as their yearnings and conviction to carry on the work of the Church, which is the work of the Lord.
Y su convicción de llevar adelante la obra de la Iglesia, que es la obra del Señor.
The virtual meeting organized by the Venezuelan Bishops' Conference is themed Our Priests in the Pandemic, Their Experience and Ministerial Exercise in this Period. It is slated to hold on Tuesday and on Wednesday. Pope Francis, in his video message, noted that in these difficult moments, he is reminded of the passage in Mark's Gospel, which tells how the apostles, on their return from the mission to which Jesus has sent them, gathered around him. He pointed out that Jesus invited them to go alone with him to a deserted place to rest for a while. With this in mind, Pope Francis reminded the meeting's participants that they cannot act alone in isolation and self-sufficiency with hidden agendas. He added that it is indispensable that we always return to Jesus, that we gather in sacramental fraternity to tell him and each other all that we have done and taught, with the conviction that it is not our work, but God's.
Hay que reavivar en la vida el deseo de imitar al buen pastor.
The Pope went on to highlight that the meeting, held online because of the pandemic, has the objective of allowing those who have received the mission to witness to and extend the Lord's fatherhood among God's faithful holy people. In this regard, he pointed out two principles that guarantee the growth of the Church: the love of neighbor and service to one another. These two, the Pope explained, are anchored in the two sacraments that Jesus instituted at the Last Supper: the Eucharist to teach love, and the washing of feet to teach service. The Pope concluded his message by inviting the bishops and priests to go forward, working joyfully and decisively in their pastoral work, and to renew the gift of themselves to the Lord and his holy people. I'm Father Benedict Mayaki.
And that brings us to the end of this edition of Vatican and World News. You can join us tomorrow at this same time for more. Meanwhile, for these and other stories, you can visit our web portal at www.vaticannews.va. You can also like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter. My thanks go to Mario Scatton in studio. In the Vatican, I'm Linda Bordoni. Bye-bye.